Rain pounded against the windows of Joe's diner as Marcus Sterling, billionaire tech mogul, ducked inside seeking shelter. The scent of coffee and warm apple pie reminded him of simpler days before his empire, when he and his late wife, Rebecca, shared dreams over $2 breakfasts. He settled into a worn red booth, his Italian leather shoes oddly out of place against the checkered floor. When he looked up, the coffee pots slipped from Sarah Miller's hands, crashing to the floor. Their eyes met, green against green like mirrors across time. Marcus felt his heart stop. The same eyes that had haunted his dreams since Rebecca died 15 years ago stared back at him. The crash drew attention from other diners, but Marcus barely noticed. His world had narrowed to those familiar green eyes, the same shade that had captivated him 30 years ago at a small coffee shop, much like this one where he'd first met Rebecca. The young waitress quickly knelt to clean up the mess, her hands trembling slightly as she apologized. The cadence of her voice carried echoes of Rebecca, too, sending chills down Marcus' spine. Marcus found himself reaching for napkins to help with the cleanup, his $10,000 suit pressing against the worn linoleum floor, a sight that made his security team shift uncomfortably. By the door, the girl Sarah, according to her name tag, tried to wave him off, but he persisted, their hands nearly touching as they gathered the scattered pieces of broken glass. The morning light streaming through the rain-streaked windows caught Sarah's profile, and Marcus' breath caught in his throat. She had Rebecca's chin, the same subtle determination in her jawline that had fallen in love with decades ago, when Rebecca was a struggling art student and he was coding his first software in a garage. Memories flooded back of Rebecca painting at sunrise, her green eyes intense with concentration as she worked. Other waitresses rushed to help, but Sarah remained frozen in place, something in Marcus' expression holding her there. The bustling diner seemed to fade away as an impossible thought began forming in his mind. Rebecca had been acting strange in the months before her death, spending long hours away from home claiming art projects and charity work that she'd never fully explained. The jukebox in the corner started playing an old Elvis song, Can't Help Falling in Love, the same song that had played during his first dance with Rebecca. Marcus watched as Sarah unconsciously hummed along, just as Rebecca used to do, the same slight tilt of her head, the same way of tucking loose strands of hair behind her ear, gestures so familiar they made his chest ache. Rising slowly, Marcus pulled out his phone with trembling fingers, bringing up an old photo of Rebecca at 25, the same age this waitress appeared to be, holding it up. The resemblance was striking enough to make his security guard step forward with concern. The young woman continued gathering broken pieces, her movements becoming more uncertain under his intense gaze. Memories of Rebecca's final months surfaced with new clarity, her insistence on updating their will, her mysterious trips to a lawyer shed never mentioned before, the way she'd cried holding old photo albums late at night, claiming it was just a cancer treatment making her emotional. But now, standing in this unremarkable diner on an ordinary rainy morning, Marcus Sterling felt his perfectly ordered world begin to tilt on its axis. Sarah finally stood, smoothing her apron with nervous hands. She started to turn away, but Marcus found his voice at last, asking her to wait, offering his business card with fingers that trembled slightly, the weight of suspicion and possibility pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. He asked about her family, her background, watching as confusion and something like recognition flickered across her features, so similar to Rebecca's that it nearly broke him. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like a crescendo building in an orchestra. The other customers faded into background noise as Marcus Sterling, tech visionary and business titan, felt the foundations of his world shift beneath his feet, because standing before him in a simple blue waitress uniform was a young woman who could have stepped straight from his memories of Rebecca, and the impossible, beautiful, devastating truth began to dawn. The private investigator's report landed on Marcus' desk 3 weeks later, his hands trembling as he read the impossible truth. Sarah Miller, age 25, abandoned at birth, adopted through Golden Hearts Agency, the same agency that had mysteriously received $1 million donation from his late wife the month before she died. Across town, Sarah sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the business card Marcus had left her unable to comprehend how her ordinary life serving coffee and struggling to pay rent had suddenly collided with one of the world's wealthiest men who claimed to be her father. Pages of documentation spread across Marcus' mahogany desk. Like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known, he was missing birth records showing a baby girl born at St. Mary's Hospital, the same facility where Rebecca had claimed to be receiving cancer treatments, adoption papers signed with a trembling hand, he now recognized as his wife's, writing bank statements, revealing a complex web of transfers designed to hide the truth from him, even hospital security footage from 25 years ago, showing Rebecca entering the building, heavily pregnant, a sight that made his coffee grow cold in its expensive porcelain cup. Sarah paced her cramped studio apartment, where water stains marked the ceiling and sirens wailed outside her window. Her adoptive mother, Ellen, had always told her the truth that she was chosen and loved, but never knew the identity of her birth parents. Now her fingers traced newspaper clippings about Rebecca Sterling, the woman who might have given her life a face so similar to her own that it felt like looking into a future that would never come. She remembered serving coffee to wealthy women over the years, wondering if any might be her mother, never imagining she had already met her biological mother, who had sat in her section every Tuesday morning for months before cancer claimed her. Marcus' security team had compiled a thorough timeline. Rebecca had hidden her pregnancy during a year when he was launching his first major software platform, working endless hours, missing the signs that should have been obvious: her sudden interest in loose clothing, her withdrawal from social events, the way she had insisted on managing her own medical appointments. The investigator had uncovered credit card receipts for baby supplies donated to women's shelters, a paper trail of a mother preparing for a child she would never raise. The walls of Sarah's apartment felt too close as she scrolled through article after article about Sterling Enterprises, about the man who had stood frozen in her diner staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. Her laptop screen glowed with images of Rebecca Sterling at charity galas, wearing designer gowns that cost more than Sarah's yearly rent. Her heart stopped at a photo of Rebecca at an art gallery opening, wearing the same emerald necklace Sarah had admired in an antique shop window last Christmas, the same green as their shared eyes. Marcus found himself parked outside the diner, again watching Sarah work through the window. Her movements, so like Rebecca's, it made his chest ache. The private investigator had discovered more. Rebecca had created a trust fund for Sarah, requiring her to work as a waitress for 5 years before accessing it, a strange condition, until Marcus remembered their own love story that had begun over coffee and dreams in a diner much like this one, his wife ensuring their daughter would understand the value of hard work and human connection before claiming her inheritance. Sarah wiped down tables, her mind spinning with questions about the woman who had given her up. The brief note in her adoption file saying only that circumstances made it impossible to keep her, but that she was deeply loved, took on new meaning as she learned about Rebecca's battle with cancer, her determination to shield her husband from additional pain during the most challenging year of his career. The secret visits to the diner suddenly made sense. All those quiet Tuesday mornings when the elegant woman with sad eyes would sit for hours drinking coffee and watching Sarah work. The manila envelope from the investigator contained one final revelation: a series of letters Rebecca had written, one for each of Sarah's birthdays, sealed and stored in a safety deposit box with instructions to deliver them only if Sarah and Marcus' paths ever crossed. Naturally, the last letter, dated just days before Rebecca's death, held a single photograph showing Sarah at work, laughing with customers, her green eyes bright with joy, exactly as her mother had hoped she would be. The headline exploded across every major news network: Sterling Enterprise hair files shocking lawsuit against Waitress. Sister security cameras caught the moment James Sterling stormed into the diner, his $5,000 suit rippling with rage as he confronted Sarah, accusing her of being a fraud and con artist. The viral video of Sarah standing her ground, her waitress uniform proudly worn as she faced down his threats, became an overnight sensation, sparking a national debate about wealth, privilege, and family. James' words echoed through the crowded diner: "You think you can walk in here and steal what our family built?" His voice cracking with a mix of fury and fear that made customers shrink back into their booths, Sarah stood behind the counter, her hands steady, as she poured coffee for a regular customer, refusing to cower even as James' entourage of lawyers filled the small space with their imposing presence. Her response, captured by dozens of phone cameras, quickly trended worldwide. "I didn't come looking for anything, you're the one standing in my workplace, making a scene." Outside the diner, reporters swarmed like hungry wolves, their cameras flashing through the rain-streaked windows as inside James continued his tirade, waving papers that supposedly proved Sarah was part of an elaborate scheme. Longtime customers of the diner formed a protective circle around Sarah, many of them remembering how she'd stayed late to help elderly regulars home during storms or kept coffee flowing during their darkest moments. The contrast between their loyalty and James' cold accusations painted a picture that social media couldn't resist. The morning shows dissected every angle, running split screens of James' corporate headshot against Sarah's high school yearbook photo. The resemblance to Rebecca Sterling undeniable. Body language experts analyzed security footage, pointing out how Sarah mirrored her biological mother's mannerisms without ever having known her, while tabloids dug into her background, finding nothing but student loans, a part-time art class schedule, and a history of volunteer work at local homeless shelters, every detail making her more sympathetic to a public hungry for authenticity. Marcus watched the chaos unfold from his penthouse office, his son's outburst playing on every screen while his PR team scrambled to contain the damage. But it was the smaller details that caught his attention, the way Sarah had instinctively protected a young waitress who stumbled during James' tirade, the same protective instinct Rebecca had shown toward younger employees during their early startup days. The grace under pressure that had been his late wife's trademark now reflected in their daughter's calm defiance. Social media exploded with hashtags Team Sarah and Billionaire's daughter trending worldwide as clips of James' confrontation were remixed into memes and viral videos. Sarah became an unwitting symbol of class warfare, her simple waitress uniform contrasting sharply with James' bespoke suit, her quiet dignity against his explosive privilege. While Sterling Enterprise stock price fluctuated wildly with each new development, conspiracy theories flourished, some claiming Sarah was part of an elaborate corporate takeover, while others suggested she was Rebecca's secret child from a previous relationship. Security footage from the diner's back alley revealed a moment the media missed after James stormed out, Sarah taking a brief break, her hands finally shaking as she looked at an old photo of her adoptive mother, Ellen, the woman who had worked double shifts to put her through school and who now lay in a hospital fighting cancer. Ellen, who had always told her that family was built on love, not blood. The image went viral, becoming a symbol of true family values that no amount of wealth could buy. James returned to his office that evening, his carefully crafted image in shambles as video of his outburst played on repeat across the internet. His assistant quietly handed him an envelope found in his mother's old files, inside a letter from Rebecca written days before her death, begging him to protect his unknown sister if she was ever found, describing how she had watched Sarah grow from afar, seeing in her all the qualities she had hoped her daughter would embody. The letter ended with a simple plea: "Remember what I taught you about what really matters in this life." Judge Martinez's courtroom transformed into a battleground as James' legal team paraded witness after witness, each telling tales of elaborate cons targeting wealthy families across the country. Sarah watched her simple life dissected by strangers, while outside protesters waved signs both supporting and condemning her. Marcus sat rigid in his custom suit, his empire threatening to crumble as family secrets spilled across social media and news headlines. The twist came when a surprise witness took the stand, a retired nurse from the hospital where Sarah was born. The air in courtroom 214 crackled with tension as James Starr, witness, a private investigator specializing in inheritance fraud, took the stand. His testimony painting a picture of similar cases across the country where opportunists had falsified DNA results and manufactured evidence to claim vast fortunes. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, her waitress uniform replaced with a modest blue dress borrowed from a coworker, her fingers twisting the worn silver locket that held photos of both her mothers, the only jewelry she owned. Photographers' cameras clicked rapidly as the prosecutor displayed a series of screenshots showing Sarah Googling Sterling Enterprises months before the diner encounter. What they failed to mention was that it had been part of a college business class assignment, the half-written paper still saved on her laptop. Their attempts to twist every innocent detail of her life into evidence of premeditation made several jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats, while others scribbled furious notes. Across the aisle, James maintained his mask of cold disdain, but his hands trembled slightly as his own text messages were read into evidence, messages to his mother's old friend questioning whether he should reveal Sarah's existence years ago. When he first discovered the truth, his carefully constructed narrative beginning to crack around the edges as his father's attorney skillfully exposed the contradictions in his story. The gallery whispered as each new piece of evidence suggested James had known about his sister long before the diner incident. The courtroom fell silent as security footage from Sterling Enterprises' lobby played on the massive screens, showing Sarah entering the building 2 years earlier for a job interview as a custodian, a position she had been rejected for due to overqualification, the timestamp matching perfectly with a calendar entry in James' assistant's phone marked potential as, citing the revelation that he had been tracking her movements long before their public confrontation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. But it was the surprise testimony of Nancy Chen, the retired nurse, that changed everything. Her weathered hands trembling as she described the night Sarah was born, how Rebecca Sterling had wept as she handed over her baby, whispering promises of protection and love, how she had made the entire medical team swear to secrecy, not to protect her reputation, but to shield her husband from choosing between his newborn daughter and the company teetering on the brink of bankruptcy during the tech crash. Marcus watched from his seat as the nurse described Rebecca's secret visits to the hospital nursery in the days following Sarah's birth, how she had set up trust funds for the entire medical team, ensuring their silence while also guaranteeing their family's financial security. The same generous spirit he had fallen in love with evident in every decision she had made. The courtroom artist captured the moment his composure finally cracked, a single tear trailing down his face as he realized how much pain his beloved Rebecca had carried alone. Sarah listened as her birth story unfolded, her own memories of quiet moments in the diner serving coffee to a mysterious, elegant woman taking on new meaning as the nurse testified about Rebecca's terminal diagnosis, her determination to see her daughter one last time, even if only from across a crowded restaurant. The tissue box passed silently between both legal teams as the nurse described Rebecca's final visit to the hospital the day before she died, updating the sealed letters she had written to both her children, begging them to find their way to each other. Deep in the Sterling Enterprise archives, a young paralegal stumbled upon a hidden safe, its contents revealing a web of deception that stretched back decades. Rebecca's personal diaries emerged, telling a heart-wrenching story of terminal illness, a secret pregnancy, and a desperate choice to protect her husband from pain. The courtroom fell silent as Sarah's attorney read entries describing how Rebecca had watched her daughter from afar, taking secret photos of school plays and dance recitals that she kept locked away until her death. Maya Chen, the paralegal who found the safe, had been working overtime sorting through decades of corporate files in the basement archives, her flashlight beam catching the slight discoloration in the wall panel that shouldn't have been there, years of training in detailed document review, making her pause at the anomaly. The safe itself was small, protected by a keypad lock that responded to a date Maya recognized from her research, Rebecca's wedding anniversary. Inside, leather-bound journals and USB drives held secrets that would reshape the Sterling family forever. The first diary entry dated back 26 years, meticulously documenting Rebecca's discovery of her pregnancy, her joy turning to anguish as she watched Marcus struggle to save their company during the dot-com crash, working 20-hour days, mortgaging everything they owned to keep their dream alive. Her words painted a portrait of a woman torn between the fierce love for her unborn child and the knowledge that the stress of a baby could shatter her husband's precarious focus at the most critical moment of their lives. Photographs spilled from manila envelopes carefully labeled with dates and locations. Sarah at 6, wearing a tutu at her first dance recital. Sarah at 12, winning the school science fair. Sarah at 16, working her first shift at the corner cafe. Hundreds of moments captured by a mother who could only love her daughter from a distance. The courtroom watchers struggled to maintain composure as evidence was presented showing how Rebecca had attended every major event in her daughter's life, sitting in back rows wearing wigs and sunglasses to avoid detection. Among the files, Maya discovered something even more startling: a series of cancelled checks and investment documents revealing that Rebecca had carefully managed her personal inheritance to create a shallow network of support for her daughter, establishing scholarships at Sarah's school, funding arts programs at her community center, even anonymously paying for her dance lessons, all while battling the cancer that would eventually take her life, each transaction carefully concealed within legitimate charitable donations that even Sterling Enterprises' best accountants had never questioned. The most damning evidence against James came from an encrypted hard drive containing emails between him and his mother in her final months, Rebecca confessing everything to her son, begging him to understand why she had kept Sarah secret, extracting a promise from him to watch over his sister from afar until the time was right. James' responses, full of confusion and hurt, gradually shifting to acceptance and a pledge to honor his mother's wishes, a promise he had twisted into obsessive surveillance and ultimately betrayal. Sarah sat transfixed as her entire life was reframed through the lens of her biological mother's secret vigil, learning how Rebecca had manipulated events from behind the scenes to ensure she had every opportunity, while still growing up understanding the value of hard work and human connection. The diary pages revealed a mother who had sacrificed her relationship with her daughter to protect both her husband and child, choosing to love from afar rather than risk destroying the lives of those she treasured most. Marcus gripped the courtroom bench, his knuckles white as his wife's words echoed through the hushed room, her final diary entry, written days before her death, expressing her hope that one day her family would be united, her faith that the same determination that had built Sterling Enterprises would give Marcus the strength to embrace the daughter she had never stopped loving. The evidence Maya had uncovered transformed the case from a simple inheritance dispute into an epic tale of sacrifice, love, and the true meaning of family legacy. Sarah took the stand wearing her mother's locket found among Rebecca's belongings, her voice steady as she described growing up with Ellen Miller, the waitress who adopted her, working extra shifts to pay for dance lessons, the same dance studio Rebecca had secretly photographed her attending. The gallery wept as Sarah revealed she had served coffee to her biological mother dozens of times, never knowing who she was as Rebecca battled cancer in her final years, choosing to remain a stranger to protect her daughter's simple, happy life. The weight of the courtroom pressed down as Sarah began her testimony, sharing memories of childhood weekends spent at the diner, helping Ellen roll silverware into napkins while learning multiplication tables, the familiar rhythm of spoons against paper matching her mother's patient voice as she explained fractions, the same practical education that Rebecca had praised in her secret diaries, watching from afar as her daughter learned both mathematics and human kindness in equal measure. Sarah spoke of her adoption story, the way Ellen had always presented it as a gift of love, not abandonment, how every birthday began with Ellen telling her about the beautiful woman who had chosen her, who had wanted her to have the best life possible, even if that meant letting her go. The court's attention riveted as Sarah described discovering years later that Ellen had gone into debt to maintain her daughter's dance lessons, never telling Sarah about the mysterious scholarships that always seemed to appear just when they needed them most. Memories spilled forth of Tuesday mornings at the diner when an elegant woman in oversized sunglasses would sit in booth 7 ordering plain coffee and wheat toast. Sarah remembered how she had always felt drawn to this customer who tipped generously and asked about her dreams, voice breaking as she realized now that every conversation had been precious moments with her biological mother that she had never recognized. The gallery listened spellbound as she recounted the last time she had seen Rebecca, Just days before her death, how she'd impulsively given her a free slice of apple pie because she looked sad. The prosecutor attempted to paint these interactions as proof of conspiracy, but Sarah countered with simple truths, producing her old uniform apron still stained with coffee, its pockets containing folded notes from regular customers thanking her for small kindnesses, her college application essay about wanting to own a diner someday written years before she'd ever heard the name Sterling, all evidence of a life authentically lived without any grand schemes or hidden motives. Tears finally fell as Sarah spoke about Ellen, now fighting her own battle with cancer in the same hospital where Rebecca had spent her final days, how she had dropped out of college to help with medical bills, never regretting the choice, because family meant showing up when it mattered most. Her words, striking a chord with Marcus, who remembered Rebecca making the same choice, choosing love over ambition when their first company faced bankruptcy. James watched from his seat as Sarah described finding an old photo album in Ellen's hospital room filled with newspaper clippings about Sterling Enterprises. Her adoptive mother had been quietly collecting evidence of her biological family for years, not to seek wealth, but to help Sarah understand her history. If she ever asked questions, the revelation that both her mothers had independently worked to protect her future in their own ways caused several jurors to wipe away tears. The courtroom held its breath as Sarah concluded her testimony by opening the locket around her neck, revealing three photos: Ellen on one side, Rebecca on the other, and in the center a mirror reflecting her own image, 3 generations of love looking back at her. She spoke her final words directly to James. I never wanted your fortune, I already had the greatest inheritance any daughter could ask for 2 mothers who loved me enough to put my happiness above their own. James Sterling's dramatic transformation began with the security footage from his mother's final days, showing Rebecca making him promise to protect a mysterious envelope. The courtroom watched transfixed as James broke down, describing how he discovered the truth about his sister after his mother's death, but fear of losing his father's love had twisted his grief into anger. His testimony shifted from accusation to confession, revealing how his own mother had made him swear to watch over his unknown sister from afar. The security footage played on the courtroom screens, showing Rebecca pale and frail in her hospital bed, reaching for James' hand, her words barely audible as she made him swear on everything he loved to protect the envelope in her wall safe. Until the right moment, James watched himself on screen, nodding, tears streaming down his 25-year-old face as his mother whispered about choices and sacrifices and the true meaning of family legacy, the raw emotion of that moment echoing across years to shake the composed corporate figure he had built. His voice trembled as he described the night after her funeral when grief and curiosity had driven him to open the envelope. Inside had found photos of a young girl growing up, someone with his mother's eyes and smile, alongside detailed instructions for watching over her from a distance, account numbers for trust funds. Rebecca had established legal documents proving Sarah's identity and a letter explaining why she had kept this secret even from her beloved husband. The weight of this responsibility had haunted him for years. James revealed how he had followed his mother's wishes, at first hiring discreet security teams to ensure Sarah's safety, watching from afar as she worked her way through college, taking pride in her resilience even as resentment grew in his heart. The courtroom listened in silence as he described the moment everything changed when he overheard his father speaking to old friends at a charity gala about always wanting a daughter. The casual comment had triggered something dark inside him, fear that he would lose his place in his father's heart, just as he felt had lost his mother to a secret she shared with everyone but him. Tears fell freely as James admitted to orchestrating the media circus himself, leaking hints to tabloids about potential Sterling heirs, hiring investigators to dig into Sarah's past, not to expose fraud, but hoping desperately to find something, anything that would discredit her before she could claim her place in the family. The shame in his voice was palpable as he confessed to breaking every promise he'd made to his dying mother, his actions driven not by malice but by a desperate fear of losing the only parent he had left. The gallery murmured as James produced his own evidence, A decade of surveillance photos showing Sarah at work, at school volunteering, at homeless shelters, images that proved both his betrayal of her privacy and her consistent character. He described watching her drop out of college to care for her adoptive mother, his mother's words echoing in his mind about the true measure of wealth being found in how we care for others, the same lesson Rebecca had tried to teach him through her own example. His voice broke completely as he shared the contents of the final letter Rebecca had left him, opened only the night before his testimony. In it, she described her hope that her children would one day stand together, supporting each other as she and Marcus had done through years of struggle. Before success came, her words painting a picture of the family she had dreamed of but would never see. The letter ended with a simple truth that had finally broken through his defenses: love multiplies, it never divides. James turned to face Sarah directly for the first time since the trial began, his carefully maintained mask crumbling as he spoke of the sister he had watched grow up from a distance, the pride he had felt seeing her overcome obstacles, the shame of letting fear poison what should have been joy at finding family. His final words echoed through the silent courtroom: I don't ask for forgiveness, I only ask for the chance to become the brother our mother always believed I could be, the protector she trusted me to be, the family she died dreaming we would become. Thunder cracked outside the courthouse as Judge Martinez prepared to deliver her verdict, but Marcus stepped forward requesting to speak, his voice carrying decades of pain and regret as he revealed his own investigation had uncovered something no one else had found: footage from his last anniversary dinner with Rebecca where she tried to tell him about Sarah, but fear and illness had stolen her chance. His public acknowledgement of his daughter and apology to both his children for years of absence transformed the legal battle into a moment of healing. Lightning illuminated the courtroom windows as Marcus pulled a worn USB drive from his pocket, explaining how he'd discovered it in Rebecca's old laptop, hidden inside a false battery compartment. The screens around the courtroom flickered to life, showing security footage from La Maison, the restaurant where Head proposed to Rebecca 26 years earlier. There, she sat across from him on their final anniversary, her hands trembling as she reached for his, but he was distracted by urgent business calls, missing the moment when she tried to share her greatest secret. Marcus' voice shook as he described watching the footage hundreds of times in his private study, seeing now what he had missed, then the way Rebecca kept touching her locket, the same one Sarah now wore, how she had started to speak several times only to stop when his phone rang again and again, the pain in her eyes as she realized she was out of time, her cancer too advanced, the moment slipping away like sand through her fingers. The courtroom fell silent as the footage showed Rebecca leaving the restaurant alone, tears streaming down her face, while Marcus remained absorbed in his phone, unaware that Head lost his last chance to know the truth. Standing before the judge, Marcus pulled out another piece of evidence, a letter found in his own bedside table, where Rebecca had hidden it the morning she died, knowing he would eventually find it when he was ready. In it, she explained everything: her choice to protect both him and Sarah during the company's darkest hour, her years of secret watching over their daughter, her pride in how both her children had grown into people of substance and character, her final wish that they would one day find their way to each other and build the family she had always dreamed of. The gallery watched in stunned silence as Marcus, sterling titan of industry, dropped to his knees before his children, begging forgiveness for being so blind, for missing the signs, for putting business before family, for creating an environment where James felt he had to compete for love, for not being the kind of father Rebecca had believed he could be. His tears fell freely now as he reached for both their hands, speaking of legacy, not of wealth or power, but of love and connection, the true inheritance Rebecca had tried to leave them. Judge Martinez sat quietly, allowing this unplanned testimony, her own eyes glistening as Marcus reviewed his decision. Regardless of her verdict, he was restructuring Sterling Enterprises, creating equal partnerships for both his children, but more importantly, he was stepping down as CEO to focus on something far more precious: the family he had nearly lost to pride and ambition. His voice grew stronger as he spoke of Rebecca's dream, of her children working together, combining James' business acumen with Sarah's human touch to transform their company into something that would make their mother proud. The judge finally rose her verdict, now a mere formality as the true judgment had already been rendered in the tears and embraces. Before her, Sarah was legally acknowledged as Rebecca Sterling's daughter and rightful heir, but the real victory was written in the way James reached for his sister's hand, in the way Marcus wrapped his arms around both his children, in the way a family shattered by secrets was finally made whole in the flash of cameras and the thunderous applause of the gallery. Marcus whispered words meant only for his children, the same words Rebecca had written in her final letter. Sometimes the greatest fortunes are built not in boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when we choose love. 1 year later, Joe's Diner hosted its grand reopening under Sarah's leadership. The humble restaurant, now a symbol of her journey, its walls adorned with photos of both her mothers, Ellen Miller and Rebecca Sterling. James managed operations, while Sarah worked the counter, still wearing her apron, greeting customers from all walks of life. Marcus learned to make coffee, discovering joy in simple moments with his children, while outside the diner window passers-by would see 3 coffee cups sharing space at a corner booth, proof that sometimes the greatest wealth comes in the most unexpected packages. The renovation had preserved the diner's classic charm, while subtle upgrades reflected the blending of two worlds. The original checkerboard floor remained, but the booths were upholstered in soft leather, the same shade as Rebecca's favorite handbag. The counter where Sarah had spent countless hours serving coffee now curved gracefully through the space, its surface inlaid with mothers of pearl, in a pattern matching the locket she still wore every day. Booth 7, where Rebecca had sat watching her daughter from afar, bore a small brass plate reading some love stories are written in coffee stains and quiet moments. James arrived every morning at 6, trading his designer suits for jeans and a button-down shirt, helping Sarah prep for the breakfast rush. Their easy banter and shared smiles healing years of separation, while they worked together to honor both their mothers' legacies. The Sterling siblings had transformed their father's company to launching a foundation that provided scholarships and small business loans to single parents, their mother's story inspiring them to help other families bridge the gaps between dreams and reality. Ellen, now cancer-free thanks to experimental treatments funded by the Sterling Foundation, held court at the counter, sharing stories with customers about the daughter who had worked so hard to save her life, while Sarah and James moved through the diner with the same grace that had marked Rebecca's every gesture, their biological mother's spirit living on in their shared dedication to creating spaces where everyone felt welcome, where wealth was measured in connections rather than dollars. Marcus discovered a new purpose in his semi-retirement, spending mornings at the diner learning the stories of regular customers, the same people who had watched over his daughter all those years when he couldn't. His business acumen now turned toward helping small entrepreneurs in the neighborhood preserve their dreams while adapting to changing times. His proudest achievement, not the fortune he'd built, but the family had finally learned to cherish. The diner became a sanctuary where billionaires and bus drivers sat side by side, where Sarah continued to serve coffee herself, remembering Rebecca's belief that true character was built in moments of service, where James learned that sometimes the most important business deals were sealed not with contracts but with handshakes and trust, where Marcus found that the finest coffee in the world tasted better when shared with family. Photographs lined the walls telling their story, the security camera still shot of Sarah dropping the coffee pot the day she met Marcus. The viral video footage of James' confrontation turned into a triumphant image of the siblings' current partnership, candid shots of Ellen and Marcus swapping stories at the counter, while Sarah and James playfully argued over pie recipes, each image a testament to how love could transform even the deepest wounds into sources of strength. Every Tuesday morning, the Sterling family gathered in booth 7, sharing coffee and memories, while Ellen taught Marcus the secret to perfect pancakes and James teased Sarah about her infamous coffee pot drop. Their laughter drawing smiles from customers who had followed their story from scandal to celebration, the diner humming with the warmth of countless small kindnesses passed from person to person like cups of coffee on a cold morning. And sometimes in the quiet moments between rushes, Sarah would catch a glimpse of her reflection in the chrome coffee makers, seeing her mother's eyes looking back at her Rebecca's final gift, not the wealth or the name, but the understanding that family was something built day by choice, love by love in all the small moments that others might miss, just like the final line of Rebecca's letter, now engraved above the diner's door. True fortune lies not in what we have, but in who we choose to become together.